She refused to take money from freezing soldiers. The next morning, the army shut down her street. No one knew why, until the truth left everyone in silence. The blizzard had raged on for over 3 days, burying the small town of Maine under a thick blanket of snow. The icy wind howled through every window frame, shaking the faded sign of the diner that read, Clara's Corner. At 58, Clara was no stranger to this stillness. Part of it came from the brutal winters, the rest from living alone since her beloved husband passed away. Clara was never one for noise. Since the death of her husband, Sergeant Richard Hayes, who lost his battle with lung cancer after years of service in the Marine Corps, she had lived with memories. Every morning, she opened the little diner they had built together for nearly 2 decades, cleaned the usual table near the fireplace, and turned on the old radio Richard used to love. The place was empty most days, but she kept cooking, kept making coffee, as if he might still walk through the door. Life wasn't easy, overdue bills, a meager pension, and fewer customers with each season. But Clara had never shut her doors, not for profit, but because this place was the last living piece of her husband's soul. That morning, snow fell thick and fast. Clara was about to close early. No one in their right mind would be out in this weather, when she heard the low growl of an engine. In the distance, a sound foreign in the white silence. Peering through the fogged-up window, she saw a military truck pulling to a stop across the road. The door creaked open, and a group of young soldiers climbed down, shivering pale from the cold. Without hesitation, Clara swung open the door and waved frantically. "Come in, boys. You'll freeze out there if you stay any longer." And so began a night unlike any other, born from a woman rooted in the past and a simple act of kindness in the heart of a snowstorm. But Clara had no idea that within just a few hours, her quiet street would become the epicenter of something extraordinary. Each time the door opened, the cold wind blasted in, but Clara paid it no mind. She bustled around the diner, bringing out everything she had left: 2 pots of chicken soup made that morning, fresh baked bread, homemade fruit, preserves, and even the jar of honey she'd been saving for the coldest nights. The fireplace roared, puddles of melted snow pooled across the floor, but the young soldiers' cheeks were slowly turning pink with warmth. There were 8 of them in total from all across the country, Alabama, Texas, Ohio. They'd been on their way back to base when the blizzard trapped them. Their truck was frozen over the heating system broken. Some of them clutched their hands to their chests, trembling. One was coughing harshly, clearly developing a cold. Clara looked at them and saw Richard's face, her husband, who once told her of night watches in Alaska where the cold would freeze even his eyelashes. One of the younger soldiers awkwardly pulled out a few crumpled bills. "Ma'am, please let us pay. We don't have much, but..." Clara shook her head and waved it off. "No, sweetheart. Just eat. In this diner, you're all honored guests, family of Richard." An older soldier, seemingly the squad's commanding officer, tilted his head gently. "Richard was your husband, ma'am?" Clara nodded, her eyes softening with a quiet sorrow. "He was a soldier too, just like you boys. And if he were still here, he'd be out there with you. I couldn't let you freeze." About an hour passed. The soldiers had eaten and were now chatting among themselves, sharing stories of life on the road and military jokes, their laughter filling the small room. Then the door opened again. This time it wasn't a soldier. It was a man in a thick winter coat wearing a badge that read Local Safety Inspector. He glanced around the room at the crowded diner, the blazing fireplace, the scattered plates of hot food. "Mrs. Clara Hayes." "Yes, that's me." "Ma'am, are you aware you're in violation of multiple safety regulations? Residential gas fireplaces are not permitted when more than 5 individuals are present in a space under 500 square feet. Food service past 9 p.m. during a weather emergency without registration is also prohibited." Clara froze, stunned. Before she could reply, he had already opened his notepad and started writing. "You'll receive an official citation within 48 hours. Your establishment may face temporary closure if compliance is not met." The soldiers rose to their feet. One of them opened his mouth to protest, but Clara simply raised her hand gently. "It's all right. I'll take responsibility." When the inspector left, the diner fell into silence. Clara smiled faintly and said, her voice calm and steady, "Don't worry, it's just a little trouble. I still believe it was worth it." But behind her brave face were overdue bills and a final warning notice from the bank: one more violation, and the diner would be permanently shut down. She told no one. She simply poured more hot tea as if nothing had happened. A single act of kindness. had now put her on the verge of losing everything. That night, while the soldiers dozed off around the table, sipping the last of their soup and sharing stories of marching through snowstorms, Clara slipped into the kitchen and leaned gently against the wooden counter. She let out a quiet sigh, not from exhaustion, but from a familiar ache: the looming unpaid electricity bill, the overdue property taxes, and now a fresh safety citation. Just one more strike, and her diner would be gone. On the kitchen wall, Clara still kept their old wedding photo taken over 30 years ago. In it, Richard stood proud in his Marine Corps uniform, smiling with that unmistakable mix of discipline and warmth. Beside it were old Christmas cards from soldiers who had stopped by over the years. Thanks for the best breakfast of 2004. Clara's corner always felt like home. When he was alive, Richard used to say, "You don't just cook meals, you feed weary hearts." Clara didn't keep the diner for money. After Richard passed, she was offered a generous deal to sell the property. A coffee chain wanted to turn it into a convenience store. They offered her triple its market value. She refused. "I can't sell this place. It's the soul of Richard," she told her lawyer. She'd had chances to leave. Her niece had invited her to the city, offered her a comfortable home and a quieter life. But Clara stayed. To her, this warm little diner with its mismatched wooden chairs and jazz playing softly from an old radio was the last home where memories still lived. Every year on Richard's birthday, Clara baked his favorite apple pie and placed a slice on table number 7, the table they used to sit at every evening. She always kept a piece for him, as if he were still there, smiling faintly through the fogged-up window. Last winter, when the roof started leaking heavily from a storm, she withdrew her entire retirement fund just to repair it. Instead of hiring a company, she asked the teenage son of a regular customer to help her. Together they climbed onto the roof and patched it up themselves. Now, as she watched the young soldiers curled up in chairs, with wool blankets draped over them, Clara felt a strange, peaceful warmth. "As long as they're safe, that's all that matters," she whispered to herself. But there was one thing she hadn't told anyone inside the tin box beneath the register. Her life savings had dwindled to less than $47, and the property tax was due in less than 2 weeks. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the white mist blanketing the rooftops, Clara was still sitting at the cashier's desk. She hadn't slept, just drifted off for a few short minutes. The diner was colder than usual. The gas tank for the heater was nearly empty. On the floor, the young soldiers were still fast asleep, wrapped in the thin blankets Clara had brought down from her own bedroom. One of them stirred. "Miss Clara, it's morning." She smiled. "I'll get the coffee brewing." But not 10 minutes later, the ground began to tremble ever so slightly. A deep rumble rolled in from the distance. At first, Clara thought it was just her imagination, until the spoon in her hand began to rattle against the edge of the cup. One of the soldiers rushed to the window and yanked the curtain open. The entire diner fell silent. Outside, the snow-covered street was being filled with a convoy of military vehicles. At the front, a Humvee bearing a commander's insignia. Behind it, 2 large transport trucks. And trailing at the end, a sleek black SUV with no license plate, the kind reserved for high-ranking officials. From windows up and down the street, townsfolk peeked out in disbelief. Then came a knock on the diner's door. A man stepped inside wearing full military uniform, his expression stern, and on his shoulders, the insignia of a U.S. Army general. Instantly, every soldier in the room snapped to attention, adjusting their uniforms. Clara blinked in confusion. "Can I help you, sir?" The man offered a formal military salute, his gaze filled with quiet reverence. "Mrs. Clara Hayes, I am Brigadier General Marcus Ellison, commander of the 38th Division. I'm here to thank you on behalf of our entire force." Clara froze. Then one of the soldiers from the night before, the slender young man with the bright eyes, stepped forward, bowed slightly to Clara, and turned to the general. "Dad, this is the woman who saved us from that freezing night." The room fell still. Everyone turned to Clara. She took a step back, her hand trembling. The young soldier was the general's son. General Ellison walked forward, his voice steady, yet filled with emotion. "Last night you didn't just give warmth to these men. You restored morale, faith, and honor to our division. In our service, we call this an act of valor without command, yet worthy of recognition." He reached into his coat and held out a sealed envelope. "This order was signed last night. I've requested a temporary roadblock on this street to allow our support convoy to arrive on time. And to ensure that no town official can shut down your diner until we finish something important. From outside, the rumble of engines ceased. Veterans stepped out of the support trucks carrying portable generators, propane tanks, crates of preserved food, and a repair crew for the building. General Ellison gently took Clara's hand. Starting today, this diner will be recognized as the official rest station of the 38th Brigade whenever we pass through this region. We filed the directive. He turned and signaled. A young soldier stepped in carrying a wooden box engraved with the name Richard Hayes in honor of his service. Inside, a reinstated Medal of Honor, granted after the Pentagon reevaluated Richard's service record. Clara broke down in tears. The little diner was no longer silent. It blazed like a fire in the middle of winter. That astonishing morning felt like a dream Clara might wake up from any second. But as each moment passed, it became clear this was real. A reward for the quiet kindness she had shown year after year. That afternoon, the entire street buzzed with energy like never before. News of what had happened at Clara's corner spread like wildfire, first through a video taken by a local resident, capturing the military convoy's arrival, then by local news outlets racing to cover the scene. Soon, images of Clara in her faded apron, standing beside a high-ranking officer holding the metal box that bore her husband's name, flooded social media. Maine TV ran a breaking headline. Tiny diner becomes military rest stop thanks to the compassion of a 58-year-old widow. But that was just the beginning. A national veterans organization, the Honor Shield Foundation, immediately sent representatives to the diner. They announced a commitment to sponsor all of Clara's operational expenses for life, including insurance, utilities, and maintenance. Soldiers need a place like this, said the foundation's director, and Clara Hayes is a living symbol of kindness that asks for nothing in return. Shortly after, a representative from the local bank arrived. The manager, slightly sheepish, placed an envelope marked urgent on the counter. Mrs. Hayes, the outstanding property tax loan on your account has been fully paid. An anonymous donor covered the entire amount. Clara opened the envelope. Inside was a receipt for nearly $8,300 and a handwritten note to the wife of a soldier who continued his mission by caring for today's warriors. Before she could say a word, locals began pouring into the diner, some with flowers, others with baked goods, and many simply to give her a hug. An elderly veteran, cane in hand, approached the counter. Richard once helped me when I came home from Iraq. Now it's my turn to stand with Clara. The emotional crescendo reached its peak when a young officer, stoic-faced and composed, stepped into the center of the diner. Mrs. Clara, with your permission, we'd like to rename this street. He unrolled a town map. From today forward, the stretch of road in front of your diner will officially be called Hayes Honor Lane, a street that honors a family who quietly served our military in ways that can't be measured. The diner erupted. People wept openly. Clara, once the quiet woman who lived in silence, now stood in the light, honored by those she had once served, without fanfare. Not because she sought recognition, but because good people deserve to be remembered. A few days later, as the snow began to melt and the soft light of spring peeked through the distant pine trees, Hayes Honor Lane became unexpectedly lively. Clara's Corner, once a quiet, nearly forgotten diner, was now so busy that extra tables had to be placed outside on the sidewalk. But no one pushed, no one rushed. People came simply to be a part of the story, a small corner of kindness that had now touched the whole country. Inside the diner, Clara was still behind the counter, still wearing her old apron. But something had changed. Her eyes no longer carried the weight of worry. They now sparkled with peace and quiet strength. Near the front window, a newly dedicated area had been set up, the Richard Hayes Memorial Corner. On the wall hung a framed photo of Richard, a young sergeant in uniform standing beside a weathered Humvee. Beneath it sat the Medal of Honor in its display case, next to handwritten notes left by visiting guests. Thank you for your service to this country. Clara, you remind us that kindness never goes out of style. I'm the son of an old soldier, and now I'm one of the soldiers you helped. The air inside the diner didn't feel like a business, it felt like a home. Strangers shook hands, shared stories, exchanged smiles. The whole town, once weighed down by winter's gloom, now glowed with warmth, all because of one quiet act on a stormy night. A small boy tugged at his mother's sleeve and pointed at Clara. Mommy, is that the lady the whole army came to thank? His mother smiled gently. Yes, sweetheart. She helped those soldiers when no one else was there. At the end of the day, as the crowd thinned and the last customer left, Clara turned off the heater and sat down at table number 7, the table where she and Richard used to sit each evening. She placed her hand on the old wooden surface, worn smooth by time and memory. Outside, the new street sign gleamed beneath the lamplight, Hayes Honor Lane, where kindness never falls silent. Clara whispered softly, "We did it, Rich. We're still serving in our own way." And in that quiet moment, whether someone was watching from their living room, a coffee shop, or a hospital bed, no one could hold back their tears. A small act, a great heart, and an ending that reminded millions there is still goodness left in this world. If this story touches your heart, please like and subscribe to the Social Justice channel. See you in the next videos.